And a very good evening to you. I'm Eugene Doyle, live from Kilkenny, and I'm with Marco Alexander, who is coming to me from live from Jerusalem, where daily life continues under the constant threat of missile attacks and regional escalation following the US-Israeli war with Iran. From the reality of bomb shelters to the global political shifts that's shaping this conflict, this is a perspective you won't hear in the mainstream Irish news. It's unfiltered, it's immediate, it's on the ground, and it's live. And you're very welcome. Marco Alexander, you're very, very welcome to the program.
A very good evening to you, Eugene. How are you?
Not too bad. Now, we do know, of course, and we'll talk about all the bomb shelters in a minute, but we do know, just let our listeners know, that a bomb shelter alert can come at any time now in Israel, in Jerusalem. And at that stage, we have to pause this conversation because Marco will have to go to the bunker for to make sure that he and his family are safe. So, Marco, let me first of all talk about because we never hear about it here. Tell me about what happens in Israel when an alert comes in. Just walk me through what happens in an alert now that when Iran fires a ballistic missile or whatever it is, or
Right.
whatever towards Israel. What happens?
Right. So what we do basically is we get a pre-alarm that basically overrides everything on our smartphones. That gives us about 10 minutes to prepare. And then if the missile is confirmed a few minutes later, the real alarm, the real siren sets off on the smartphone, and we have to head to our protected room. Now, by law, every house in Israel now, every house since the 1990s, has to be equipped with a safe room. That is basically a bomb shelter within each apartment or house. And we go to this shelter and we stay there till we get the all clear. That's generally speaking what happens. Some days it can happen 5 or 6 times per day. Here in Jerusalem, we're probably a little luckier than we would be up north, because up north they've been taking a lot more flack. But nonetheless, it can be between 5 and 6 and 8 times we can head to the shelter in Jerusalem. Now, if we're in a public space, for example, a shopping center, there they also have protected areas. So basically, all public spaces in Israel have an assigned protected area to which you have to head in the event of a missile alert. So we're pretty well prepared in that sense.
And I know I spoke to you earlier when I rang you earlier. You were actually in the shelter at home,
That
and
is correct.
you
Yes.
spoke to your
Yes.
wife who was out and about, and she had to go and find the nearest shelter to her.
That's right. That's right. That's pretty much what happens. Yes.
Okay, and roughly at the moment, roughly how often is that happening on a daily basis at the moment?
Today we've been quite lucky. It probably happened about 3 times in Jerusalem today, but the night is still long, put it that way. So I'm expecting other sirens. It has happened up to 8 times during the course of a day. So we have to be ready and for this eventuality. Yeah.
So you could be you could literally be in your bed at night, and next thing this alarm goes off during the night, and you have to then carry out go through the drill of going to the bunker. Is that it?
Absolutely. That's happened on many an occasion, Eugene. Many an occasion, and not just with the Iran war. It's happened with all the previous conflicts with the Palestinians in Gaza, where they were sending over missiles from Gaza. So we're pretty used to this. With the threat of long range and ballistic missiles, I remember the first time was during the course of the first Iraqi war. Okay, that was our first experience. Things have changed quite significantly in the sense the country is now much more prepared. These bomb shelters are everywhere. Each new apartment has to have these bomb shelters. And of course, we have Iron Dome and Arrow David Sling and all the other mechanisms which attenuate, but nonetheless, some do get through. They cause damage, and clearly there have been victims as well.
And in the bomb shelters, both at home and in the public ones, is there an itinerary of what should be in or has to be by law in those? Do you have supply of food or what is it?
Well, we have a supply of food, but we don't necessarily store it there. The bomb shelter is just for immediate use. It's not for long-term use, of course. I mean,
Okay.
it's you know, with when the attack is over, you leave the room. Of course, you cannot stay there longer than well, you can stay longer, but obviously, it's not feasible to stay there any longer than that.
And how are people actually dealing with this situation, Marco, in both Jerusalem and indeed around Israel? How are they dealing with this on a daily basis?
People are dealing with it well, and this doesn't surprise me. People here are very resilient. They get along with their daily lives. So the country has by no means ground to a halt. The country is functioning. The economy is doing well, notwithstanding the war. The only thing that's been affected has been my sphere of endeavor, tourism. But as for the rest, things are moving along nicely.
And are people in Jerusalem directly affected, or is it more psychological, the constant threat?
No, directly affected in the sense missiles do arrive here. The odd missile does hit Jerusalem. Um, but it is in the background, even when even when there aren't so many missiles and things seem normal, one cannot ignore the fact that we are at war, and we have been at war on many different fronts for nearly 3 years. So even if it isn't apparent to the visitor, let's say, it is there running in the background. Everybody has family members involved in this war at some level. Indeed, we're all involved in this war at some level because we're all potential targets. One has to bear in mind that both the Iranians and their ideological bedfellows, the Palestinians, have the same objectives: to harm Israeli and Jewish and non-Jewish Israeli civilians. The war is a constant, and it's running in the background, but we're prepared for it.
Are you back there?
Yep, yep, I'm with you. Yeah, I didn't leave. Was there a bit of lag? I think there's some problem at your end, Eugene. My thing is running here.
Marco, I can't hear you.
Back on. You should hear me now.
I can hear you now. You
Yeah,
just froze. I don't know
yeah,
what happened there, but anyway,
I,
let's get back to what we were talking about.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so just in relation, we've seen reports of missiles and even debris landing near holy sites. How
Mm.
significant?
Your connection has gone again, Eugene.
You there? Yeah.
End with the connection. Anyway, not
Yeah.
to worry. Not to
Okay.
worry.
Go ahead.
Okay, let's.
Yeah, I was asking you there about
Yeah.
the holy sites being some of them being closely hit, close by anyway.
Yes. Debris landed in the vicinity of the old city, so it could have hit any of the of the holy sites, from the Temple Mount to the Dome of the Rock to the Holy Sepulchre. They would all have been within range. Now, this was debris, so I presumably we're talking about an interception. So there is a risk. Yes. Yes.
Now, just moving, and we'll come back to Israel shortly, but just moving a little bit beyond that, because in Ireland here, the one narrative here all the time is about Gaza. There's still street protests about Gaza, even though there's absolutely nothing. There is lots happening, I'm sure, behind the scenes in relation to Trump's peace plan, but there's no one out looking for the Iranian regime to be overthrown or anything in this country. It all seems to be about Gaza, that they want to keep this focus. How do Israelis see? Iran is now central to your situation, and how does Israelis see the conflict that we're looking at now, that's going on between you guys and the US and Iran? How does Israelis look at this?
Well, obviously, this is seen as an existential war, the greatest existential threat since at least the Yom Kippur War of 1973, maybe on a greater scale. I believe this is probably on a greater scale than any of our previous wars of survival. All our wars have essentially been wars of survival since 1948. So this is probably seen as from a geopolitical point of view, as the most important, because we have the rare moment of interest, of the interests of Israel and the United States coming together. So it's playing out on a much wider stage. Let's put it that way. With regard to Ireland, and you mentioned Ireland, one should hardly be surprised, in a sense, if you remember the letter from the previous president of Ireland, the Uachtaráin, to the Iranian leadership, which was very much congratulatory and expressed in very warm tones. So that shouldn't really surprise us. Unfortunately, what's been happening in Ireland is that the people have been hoodwinked for decades with regard to what's been happening here in the Middle East. Unfortunately, we have the same. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Marco. Go on. We have the same.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, we have the same confluence of elements: academia, politics, economics, that contrive to give I should have mentioned the media, of course. The media is one of the main actors, but of course it is an expression of the other three. We see that they all come together to supply a distorted picture of events to the Irish public. But it is very similar to what's happening in many other countries in Europe. For example, scant attention was paid to the tens of thousands of Iranians who were murdered in recent months by the Iranian regime. The total by far surpasses what happened in Gaza, when most of the victims were indeed Palestinian terrorists. So you see that they're willingly and knowingly supplying a distorted picture of events here in the Middle East. But what people don't realize is that it is to the detriment of the Irish people themselves, because what it does is it's been masking a slow but relentless process of Islamization in Ireland itself. Okay, the Islamization hitchhikes the Palestinist cause and Palestinism, whereby it insinuates itself into every aspect of Irish life. Okay, so that's generally what's been happening.
And in relation to the protests in Iran, where the people were being shot, in Ireland, the coverage was very sparse. No continuity to it at the time. It came in small sound bites every now and again about what was happening in Iran. As an Irish person, how do you look at Ireland's coverage of events there? How do you look at it as an Irishman? How do you look at the events as we cover them in Ireland?
It renders a great disservice to Ireland, Eugene, for the reasons that I've explained just a minute ago. It distracts people from the real problems that Ireland is now facing, with mass immigration from populations that are hostile to Ireland. And indeed, we've spoken about this before, about the way these groups are appropriating sacred spaces in the Irish narrative. Places associated with Ireland's struggle for independence, before in mass prayers in cathedrals, mass prayers all over the place. But you will note, Eugene, this has been happening all over Europe. And just as it's been gaining scant attention in Ireland, this has been repeated all over Europe. The countries which I'm familiar with Italy and with the United Kingdom, you see it all over Europe. It's a recurrent theme and part of a greater plan to dissolve and 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 compromise the social fabric, weakening it, okay, for these people to be able to make their move.
And in relation to what's your view on this in relation to the Catholic Church, for example, prioritizing the Palestinians over Christians who are being murdered all around the world in various countries around the world? That why do you think that the Catholic Church has been cozying up to the poor, as they call them, poor Palestinians? Why do you think that? Why do you think that sounds kind of crazy? Does it not?
It is absurd. It is absurd. One need only bear in mind the plight of the Christians in the areas under the PA. As we mentioned numerous times in our previous podcast, the Christian population of Bethlehem has been reduced from 80% to less than 20%.
And what
Okay.
is the reason for that? What is
The
the reason?
reason for the vicissitudes that they have to face on a daily basis, and these are caused by the Muslim population. The Muslim population, of course, which is an expression of the ideology of the PA, the Palestinist Authority. Essentially speaking, these are people motivated by Muslim Brotherhood ideology. Now, you will hear people say, but there are Christians who work within this organization. And indeed, that is true. These are the useful idiots of Palestinism. As indeed you had well-meaning people also who who were the useful idiots of the Bolsheviks, and this has been replicated here.
Now, for a country that is Ireland being 3.5 times the size of Israel, just for people who may not know that, we're about 3.5 times the size of Israel, and you're fighting wars on a number of fronts, and have been for many months now, if not a couple of years now at this stage. And just in relation to Lebanon, we're hearing that Israel now may create a buffer zone in southern Lebanon up as far as the Litani River. How serious is that development?
It's a serious and necessary development. You will have a bit of experience with this, Eugene, because you were part of the United Nations forces that were supposed to maintain the peace. Obviously, you had a thankless task, of course, with when you don't have political support, there's very little you can do. So, in effect, you and your colleagues were put in a position whereby you became human shields for terrorist organizations. Okay, Israel has been subject to attacks from Lebanon since the foundation of the state. Okay, granted that in 1948 we could say it was very limited, and I believe with had there been a Christian government, a Christian state, Lebanon was supposed to be a Christian state. Had it been able to continue we would have been able to have very reasonable agreements. But that unfortunately was scuttled by the introduction of foreign actors, namely the PLO. The PLO basically shifted the balance, the internal dynamics of Lebanese society, and what many people don't know, precipitated a real genocide of the Christian population. Now, what's with regard to Israel, what's been happening is that attacks have been launched on a regular basis since Hezbollah got the upper hand, and indeed since the PLO became involved in Lebanon many decades ago. So that was the first Lebanon war was the one that took place in 1982, subsequent to the terrorist activities of the Palestinist organizations there. They just go ahead. Sorry,
Go on,
sorry.
go on, go
No,
on.
they destroyed any semblance of internal balance or cohesion, but I shouldn't even say cohesion, but there was a sort of a status quo. And since then, Hezbollah, the Shiite militia sponsored by the Iranians, Hezbollah are a proxy, have been effectively waging a continuous campaign against Israel, which the West has been ignoring for many years. So much so that they bored tunnels from Lebanese territory into Israel itself. Okay, and this is before the outbreak of full scale war. So there had been a casus belli for many years, put it that way. Israel would have been well within its rights to have preempted this situation. It
Now,
chose not to.
do you have any sympathy whatsoever for the Lebanese president, President Aoun, in this sense, in that it would appear that his country is not capable of disarming Hezbollah? He seems to give the impression that they want to. The Americans want them to do it, but they are simply not. Do you accept they're simply not able to do it, and that Hezbollah have the upper hand here?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Hezbollah had the upper hand. Now the situation has somewhat changed. So at a certain point, make your mind up time has to come into force here for the other communities. They have to take a stand, and that's going to be a necessary condition for any type of peace. But in any case, Israel is not going to trust these people anymore. Israel is going to create a buffer zone up as far as the Litani River.
Okay, and that is different than seizing the territory for Israel, isn't it? It's not. It's not.
I'm not even sure about that, Eugene. I'm not at a certain point after you've been under continuous attack for nigh on 80 years. That's the reality of the situation. I'm not sure whether Israel is in a position to say, listen, folks, now we're going to give you a refund for continuous acts of aggression. I believe, from the point of view of natural law and natural justice, Israel would be within its rights to remain there. Whether it'll do so is another matter altogether, but it would be well within its rights.
Now, is there a concern? You're living you're living through this. Is there a concern that this is turning into a full regional war involving multiple countries? Do you think it can be contained?
Well, it is a full regional war. You've seen the Iranian attacks on the Gulf states, so I think it would be a bit of a stretch to say that it isn't a regional war. Whether it'll further escalate, that's another matter. But it is already a regional war. We see the involvement of of the Arab states. They've been the targets of numerous attacks now, much more so than Israel, and they don't have any effective air defense. So it is a regional war. Whether it'll blow up and sort of extend and the dots will join with what's happening in Syria as well and elsewhere, is pretty much an open question at the moment.
Now, in relation to in relation to the other countries involved in this war, the Gulf states, some of them have, even at the UN, have surprised Israel by coming in on the side of Israel, even though that's not what they would say. They're not on the side of Israel, but have come in on the side of Israel in condemning Iran in relation to
Mm.
these attacks.
Yes. Well, they don't really have much choice, do they, Eugene? They are the object of attack, so that would be a default position um, with
Okay.
regard to regimes such as Qatar, which up until very recently was in bed with the Iranians. And Qatar is indeed one of the malignant actors on the international scene anyway. It finances terrorism all over the world, university faculties in Europe. It invests enormous sums in Europe, in football teams. This is all a way of perpetrating what I defined and others define as stealth jihad. So none
And
of them are friendly actors,
yeah,
put it that way.
and he who pays the piper plays the tune, isn't that it?
Exactly.
Now, in relation to, there would appear to be some cracks in the regime in Iran, in this sense that the president of Iran has apparently clashed with the IRGC over these attacks on the Gulf states. He has
Mm.
said that this is not going to do Iran any good going into the future, and he was more or less put back in his box by the IRGC commander. Is that, I suppose, that would be a hopeful sign if it would meant anything, I suppose, to the
Mm.
people of Israel.
Well, certainly the regime is creaking. We know that for a fact. Um, with regard to its industrial and economic capacity, it's been put back significantly, decades perhaps. That depends. That depends on how things play out, of course. If it comes tumbling down, then the possibility will open for foreign investment and maybe some kind of Marshall Plan to get the country back on its feet. It's a country with great potential, by the way. Iran is a great country with a great history. Um, we know of it from classical Greece as well. It has a great history, so it can pick itself up. Obviously, if in some shape or form the Islamic regime is perpetuated and it is allowed to limp along, then the Iranian people will be in for a very painful period.
And not only are the Iranian people an exceptional people, but haven't in normal times, if you had normal regimes or normal governments in Iran, the Iranian people have been friendly with the Jewish people for centuries, have they not?
Yes, there is a long-standing relationship. Absolutely. One need only to think back the biblical period, King Cyrus and Darius, and various parts of the Jewish narrative which take place in in Persia. The Book of Esther, for example. So there's a long-standing relationship, which unfortunately has been poisoned by Islamism, the Shiite variant of Islamism.
And Marco, we're looking at, there's a lot being talked about here in relation to international law, and
Mm,
the Iranians call on use this when it suits them to use Iranian to international law. It would appear that Donald Trump has seen that international law only works when it suits people to work. International law does, and that the two weaknesses that he has exposed since he came into office is both international law and the United Nations. Start with
mm,
international law first of all.
mm.
The Iranians and other states opposing Israel seem to
Yes.
use international law when it suits them.
Indeed, international law can only really work when you have all people who are, in a real sense, undertake to maintain the conditions of a contract, like everything else in life. It's a bit like a football match, okay? We can imagine a scenario: football match, somebody starts to pick up the ball, the football match is no longer a football match. of course. Now, these people invoke international law when it suits them. It's sort of a pick and choose understanding of international law. And indeed, many international lawyers themselves, those who claim to be jurists of the highest caliber, very often ignore the wider body of evidence available to them. And this is particularly significant with regard to the United Nations, which clings to resolutions but then abstracts them out of context. Because rarely do you hear the United Nations speak about the repeated acts of aggression, indeed genocidal wars, that the surrounding countries have launched against the state of Israel since 1948. Bear in mind, in 1948, the population of Israel was 200,000, and it was taking in Holocaust survivors. Okay, so you can imagine how much the nascent Jewish state would have wanted to start a war or to be involved in a war. What people tend to forget is that in 1948, when the Jewish people were still recovering from a Holocaust, the surrounding Arab countries launched a genocidal war against the nascent state of Israel just 3 years after the Holocaust. What other people tend to forget as well, that many people in the Arab Muslim world collaborated in this endeavor. The Mufti of Jerusalem himself was one of the main actors in the Holocaust narrative.
And in your opinion, what we've seen of the UN, especially since October the 7th, the UN, do you believe that the days of the UN are numbered?
I believe they should be numbered. It is a rotten edifice. It is a rotten edifice. How can an organization function when a huge element, a huge percentage within them has values that are totally in opposition to anything we recognized as being essential to civilized society? It was stillborn. The fact of the matter, it was stillborn.
Okay, now the Pope has intervened again today. I believe I saw it on some on the wires there today, saying that God will not reward those who invoke His name when they've attacked another country, and that He's called for a ceasefire. Do you believe that? Do you believe that what do we make of that when the Pope comes out like that? When we're trying to, a lot of people see this Iranian regime as an evil regime and an evil power.
Right.
What are we supposed to take from what the Pope is saying?
I believe that the Pope, unfortunately, and I'm sure he's a well-meaning person, is doing a great disservice to Christians around the world. Christians around the world will be disorientated by these kind of utterances. There are times in life when you have to stand up for what you believe in, when you have to confront evil. That is a basic element in any understanding of morality.
Can I, just before we go any further, I just want to, anyone who might be listening to us, I just want to just throw up a couple of screens and ask people to subscribe to the Green Zone. And this will be a weekly episode with Marco and myself. And you're welcome to subscribe to it. We're also looking for you to, don't hide that one yet. And we're also looking you to drop your comment or question in the chat, and we don't mind what side of the fence you're on. We will take any question that comes in or comment, and we will make sure that it's heard. So there are the two things. If you subscribe, and drop your comment in the chat. Now, continuing on, just Marco, just in relation to the Irish situation here. You've said much of this doesn't reach Irish audiences, and you're right there. What are the biggest gaps in the coverage of affairs in Israel and surrounding countries? What are the biggest gaps in coverage from here from Ireland, from an Irish point of view?
Well, I believe that the media is willingly and knowingly avoiding reporting many facts, not only what is happening in the Middle East and Israel, but also within Ireland itself. I've been hearing of shocking episodes, but these are from alternative media sources to which the Irish people have not been exposed. Um, the problem with media is that people very often believe the mainstream media to be an authoritative sort. Unfortunately, the media in Ireland and elsewhere has been concealing it. It's as if certain things have not been happening. So this is the main problem.
Okay, and in relation to, for example, the war is daily now; it's going on daily. Tell us what life is like in Israel. For example, tourism gone, and you're that's felt by yourself as well because you are a tour guide in the Holy Land in Israel, and. Is there schools closed? Is there evacuations? What kind of things are closed that we take for granted here?
Yeah, the only thing that's really closed are the schools, and the government have been toying with whether to open them or not, in the light of the fact that the missile strike for the moment has been of very limited success. I say limited success, it's still obviously too much because there have been victims and there has been destruction. So they managed to intercept most of them. Schools at the moment are still on hold. Okay. The situation is more serious in the north where people are more exposed. Um, Otherwise, life continues very much as normal. You see businesses are open, cafes are full, restaurants are full. People are by no means downhearted here. People are resilient, they are strong, they live in hope. This is the great strength of Israel. This is the great strength. It's something which we don't see, which you don't see in Europe anymore. National cohesion, a sense of purpose. This is what keeps the country going. And at the center of this is identity. Identity in Israel is very strong, and this
And
gives the coordinates to proceed.
absolutely. And am I right in saying that that cohesion has got even stronger since the Gaza war? Because there was a lot of worry when that started. That after October the 7th and the tragedy of that, a lot of some countries probably would have folded under that, under those circumstances. But as the war went on with Gaza, it made the people of Israel more resilient, did it not?
It made the people of Israel even more resilient. And in fact, there's been a huge reawakening, a huge Jewish reawakening. People who had given scant attention, paid scant attention to Jewish tradition, to Jewish history, have been drawing closer to it once more and appreciating it. There has been an absolute revolution in this sense. And the people at the forefront of this are the young people. It is the young people who have taken the initiative.
Because and that is surprising. It's only surprising here because we look at young people here and they don't seem to have the same. A lot of them, not all of them, but some of them don't have the same work. And that people would worry about if a situation arose here, would the young people be up to the mark? But seemingly in Israel, I mean, that was I think that you could safely say that was a big surprise for the army as well, that the young people shone really
Mm.
during the war, is it not?
They perform beyond expectations, much better than the leadership in the army. Let's be perfectly frank. The leadership at the time of the Gaza war were not up to the task. Things are now changing. Old schemes have been broken, but it's generally been the young soldiers that have been keeping the ship afloat and bringing it into port.
Just turn it for a second there just to the PA, because I know you'd know something about this. The PA, I just saw it on an article earlier this morning. I just can't find it there right now, but I saw it on an article there, that the PA now are have opened museums of Palestinian history, and they're maintaining that they're getting stuff recognized by the United Nations, UNESCO, for sites in the West Bank. What do you make of that?
Nothing surprises me in this sense. The United Nations and its constituent members, and of course, you have to bear in mind that the Iran was head of the Human Rights Commission, so none of this surprises me. It's all a fictitious narrative. It's all make believe. It's all nonsense, and people are beginning to open their eyes. As I mentioned before, people believe that Palestinianism is something that just affects Israel. But no, it's not. It's something around which all those elements that seek to undermine Western society coalesce, namely the Islamists and all the various left-wing organizations that wish to see Western Judeo-Christian society dissolve.
Turning, Marco, to the government in Israel, what is the public mood towards the government right now?
I would say the public mood is quite positive. Quite positive. Obviously, mistakes have been made, but I think there's a general understanding that we are in the best hands possible. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a very capable prime minister. At times, I've been of the opinion that he could have done things differently, but I recognize that he will go down in history as one of the great statesmen of the past 100 years. He is a very capable person, and he does have the interests of the Jewish people and of the Israelis, non-Jewish Israelis, at heart. So I believe that the general mood is positive.
Okay, and while you say that, there is reports that even during the war, political support isn't increasing for him. Why is that?
No, I'm not sure whether look, I mean, it depends who you talk to. And of course, there are a different series of opinion polls. But the general feeling is that we are in the best hands possible. I shudder to think at what would have happened had the previous government been in power, the previous government which ceded sovereign territory, maritime waters to essentially a Hezbollah government. And
Okay.
I believe he's dealt with a very difficult situation, a very difficult internal situation, because it's not only Ireland that is endowed with a problematic media. Here, too, up until the advent of Channel 14, basically the left had the monopoly of media coverage, and also the Supreme Court, which basically strikes down any initiative which is not to its liking, thereby buttressing basically a progressive agenda.
In relation to Benjamin Netanyahu, Marco, you believe that President Herzog should give him what's it called?
The pardon.
Pardon, due to the court case cases that he's involved in.
The court cases that have been brought against him are basically a stitch up anyway. Let me be perfectly frank. They are a stitch up. They are perversions of any notion of justice. That in time of war, a president should do that. That is beyond any doubt, that in time of war, he should put an end to this farce.
Because am I right in saying that Netanyahu is still attending trial even during the war? Is he?
He's still attending a trial during the course of the war when his energies need to be expended elsewhere, dealing with the war. So he
Okay.
has to go to regular hearings.
And how do you think the people of Israel do you think that the majority of Israeli people believe would go along with your thing that he should be pardoned? Do you believe
I
that?
believe so. I believe so. I believe so. I believe so.
Okay. Um, okay. And how much does the ongoing conflict affect trust in leadership? I mean, we're seeing the opposition, Lapid, and coming out with really, really um, um, very hard hitting statements against the prime minister during the
Mm,
war. Um,
yes.
does the ongoing um, conflict affect trust in leadership?
Well, I don't think that it affects trust in the present government because by and large, people recognize that they are more capable than the opposition. Um, Listen, they're not perfect. They do make mistakes, and I believe that there are certain things that need to be changed. But by and large, I believe that this is the best government possible at this moment in time.
And looking forward, Marco, no, it's very difficult to look forward if you're in Israel and you're heading to bunkers up to 8 times a day, and um, let's say they overran the regime in Iran and took them out, and that a proper government was installed there. How safe would you think that Israel would be then?
Well, certainly we would have eliminated a genocidal regime which is on the verge of having nuclear weapons with mounted on ballistic missiles. Was the greatest existential threat Israel was facing. When I say the greatest, you never know which threat is the greatest because I believe we also have threats here within Judea and Samaria which have been somewhat underestimated as well. But certainly eliminating the Iranian front, Iran, which was a source of financing, incitement, and of course, which had Israel as the focus, as its obsession. And here we're talking about a Nazi obsession, a country which diverted a huge amount of resources to destroying another country, which in a normal situation one would have to say there were no conflicts of interest. Israel has no border with Iran. It has no territorial claims. So here we're talking about something that was purely genocidal in nature. And they boasted about it as well. They made no secret of it.
I want to ask you two final questions in relation to the US and how Israel sees what's going on. I mean, first of all, do Israelis worry that Trump, as we know, he's so unpredictable? Do the Israelis worry that he could pull out of the war at any time? And do the Israelis want Israeli people? Do they want the IDF and the US to go all the way?
I think, well, to answer the last part of your question, I think they'd like to see the job done, to see Iran significantly depleted and possibly facilitate the collapse of this regime. With regard to President Trump, yes, he is a little bit unpredictable, certainly. By and large, he's been good for Israel. Of course, that can change. He is primarily concerned with American interests. And in this instance, it has dovetailed with Israeli interests. Bear in mind that it's not just about Iran, it's also about America reasserting itself on the international scene because Iran is supported by Russia and China.
Okay.
And there is, as I mentioned before, America, for it to remain America in the meaningful sense of the world, cannot be a big fish in a small pond. A big fish in a small pond ends up in a frying pan. America, for it to survive and to flourish, it needs to be on the world stage.
And if the Israelis and the Americans do go as far as taking out or facilitating the overthrow of the regime, do you believe that the outcome of that might be that other surrounding states surrounding Israel will, for once and for all, try to do some kind of peace deal and actually, maybe in some ways, without saying it, look up to the Israelis because they are seem to be the country that's able to, kind of go in and do the job, and for the size of it. Do you think that there could be better relations with other surrounding Arab states?
Well, it depends which Arab states. Not all Arab states have the same sentiment towards Israel. We have decent relationships with the Emirates. We've had decent relationships with the Emirates in recent years. With Saudi Arabia, it's been up and down. With Egypt, we are basically in a state of Cold War. Bear in mind that the Gaza war would not have happened had arms and munitions and financing not been smuggled from the Egyptian side of the fence. And not just with the Egyptians turning a blind eye, but with the active assistance of the Egyptians. I think what many people don't know is that the Egyptians have been building a vast military infrastructure in the Sinai Desert. So I'm not optimistic with regards to the Egyptians, okay? But with regards to other Arab states, certainly I think there could be some very positive developments. In the Lebanon, there could be positive developments. The Christian and Druze, and to a lesser extent, the Sunni Muslim population, I believe, would like to see things different relations with Israel. Jordan is not such a friendly country, notwithstanding the fact that we do have diplomatic relations. Syria, as you well know, is basically ISIS in double-breasted suits, sponsored by Turkey. Turkey is another problematic actor seeking to reacquire status as an empire, namely to restore the Ottoman Empire. So there are many variables.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it, because what we've done in this first updates from Jerusalem here on the GreenZone is just do a broad conversation about many, many subjects. And what we'll do over the next episodes is we'll concentrate in on the week that was, if you like, in Israel and the Gulf states in this war and beyond. And we'll take a number of topics over the next couple of weeks. Now, we won't be here next Sunday because next Sunday is Easter Sunday, and I'm not around. I know that, but we will do it the following Sunday. And I just thank you for listening. If you've been tuned in, thank you for listening. And just to reiterate, what we've heard tonight is a reality far removed from the headlines that would be seen in Ireland. A society functioning under constant threat, adapting in real time. And you're talking about daily disruption, moving in and out of bomb shelters up to 8 times or more per day, whether that's at home or you're out doing your shopping. You have to go to a bunker if you get the alert. I mean, that is just would be horrendous for any of us to think about. Regional instability, as we know, hopefully this war will bring about regional stability going forward. And for a country that is, for a country where we're 3.5 times the size of Israel, the human resilience in Israel is remarkable, to say the least. It's absolutely remarkable. And they couldn't buy it. So, because they talk about the Jewish people being able to buy their way out of everything, or buy everything. They couldn't buy that resilience that they show on a daily basis. It's absolutely incredible. And we're intent on bringing you the real story of what's going on in Israel and the surrounding countries that obviously once it got rid of So they're always living in an existential threat. From the Green Zone and updates, Marco, thank you indeed for joining me.
My pleasure, Eugene.
And we will be back on Sunday week with the week that was or in this case, the fortnight was in Israel and the surrounding countries. Marco, thanks indeed again.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Slán agat.
Slán agat, slán. And take care, and thank you indeed for joining me.